Hey y'all. We missed yesterday's we were supposed to do this yesterday, but I was tired. I'm working on a couple things with four less Nobodies, so that kind of took up my day yesterday. But we went over chapters 16 through 20 of Metu Neter, and chapter 16 is titled The Oracles. And this chapter goes over the five primary binary figures, the 14 archetypes, which is the 70 cards, the tarot cards. And this also the 14 archetypes are also the body parts of Asar. Um, and this also covers the uses of oracles in Old Testaments. I tried to find the Metu Neter cards. They're very hard to find. Um, One website had them for like $45, the other one 30. But I'm on a mission because now I feel like I can't get them, so now I have to get them. And so chapter 16 introduces all that. Chapter 17 goes into detail about the deities of the Metu Neter. I guess I'll just read them off. As I read them off, can you go to chapter... Okay, so yeah, chapter 17 discusses the deities of Metu Neter. But if you go to... I want to say it's chapter 18. They repeat them again, but they also repeat them as failures and as successes. In chapter 17, Amen, it means concealed. We reach the state of Hetep when we become unattached or unaffected by emotions. This is where we reach our innermost peace, and it cannot be disturbed. It is the source of all spiritual power and the essential nature of the Supreme Being. Asar, as a drop of water in the ocean, are the same qualitatively, but different in magnitude. The seat represents mediumistic trance, and the eye symbolizes the indwelling intelligence. Tahuti, in the chapter, it breaks down Tahuti into two words. The first part, Tahu, means to measure, and T means dual, two. The ability to qualify life's experiences and the spiritual guidelines through quantification and measurement, the dual factor by which all ideas and concepts are weighed, are best based on relative place in time and space. The Achal Metu, weighing of words. Can you turn to page 217? The evaluation of concepts, ideas, beliefs, behavioral, shaping factors, and spiritual practices. The tree of life is a device to categorize and evaluate one's beliefs, mental and spiritual functions, etc., as the periodic table does for the elements. So, page 217. Do I have a quote circled in any way, shape, or form? Okay. The arrival at a conclusion or judgment without going through a thinking process, that is, through direct perception of reality itself instead of manipulating the symbols representing the reality, is wisdom. So wisdom is in the second sphere. It's the arrival of a conclusion without a thinking process and manipulating symbols. Synthesis is the arrival to a conclusion through manipulating symbols and embodying abstract thoughts, which is your fourth sphere. This is used in Chinese medicines, the holistic approach, when they have the same name for all the illnesses. They have the same remedies for all the illnesses. Syllogistic logic is the arrival at a conclusion through induction, deduction, and inference. This is the A sphere. This is what we do now with the scientific theory, also how Western medicines work. We do everything outward. We do everything through outward experiments, outward observations, etc., etc. It's smarter to tie all the illnesses together, which is basically what this paragraph was coming towards. Oh, thank you, Timothy Warren. Grand rising to you. We're doing this early in the morning. I just got off work. I work overnight, so excuse me if my reading and stuff is a little off. I'm a little tired. But yeah, so it's smarter to tie illnesses together. Failure to realize that remedies are not limited to effects that exist in their minds, neither are the disorders. So this chapter goes on to describe side effects. So side effects aren't really what we think it is. Like, okay, so if you have an illness, right, your one illness does not just affect that one part of your body. Like if I have a cold and all you're paying attention to is the fact that I have mucus. You're not paying attention to all the other body systems that are being
Or like
affected.
if I had a fever, I would pay attention to my face, like my forehead if it's hot.
Right. But you're not paying attention to the other parts of your body because you're not doing it with a holistic approach. You're just approaching that one thing that you know from, syllogistic logic. You're focusing on that one thing to cure the illness. Now, when you focus on that one thing to cure the illness, you're ignoring the other things on the outside of it. And then when you give the remedy, like the way the Western medicines work, what Western practices fail to realize is when you give a pill for one thing, it doesn't just affect that one thing you're taking the pill for. That's why you have these side effects. It's not side effects, it's the lack of acknowledgement that when you do something, it doesn't just affect one thing, it affects a multitude of things. It's not just limited to that one effect that you want it to have. And that's what a lot of people, fail to realize when they take all these medicines out here and they look at stuff like, oh, that's just a side effect. When you think about it in that way and use those words, it kind of makes you dismiss the medicine itself. That's why I don't take medicine. I just don't do it. I'm not telling other people not to do it because I'm not a doctor, but I know my body. And there was this weird thing that I used to do when I was a kid. When I used to be sick or I used to have a pain, I used to close my eyes and imagine where the pain was. And I would imagine my body like fixing it. So
you actually said that before in like 2 other videos.
Yeah, like I said that before. So that's something that I always did when I was a kid. So now as an adult, now that I can put like a label to what I used to do as a kid, now it's easier for me to do it. So that's what I do instead. And it really does help. I really be convincing myself that I don't feel pain. It's crazy. But Chinese medicines have one name for each illness and one remedy for each illness, and it kind of concentrates on the wholeness of everything. Each practice is categorized on page 218.
Each of them have their own method and sphere.
Yeah.
Like the Baoxi flower therapy would be the 10th sphere.
Keep going. Just read them. He's going to read out the different methods of healing in the sphere on the tree of life that each method pertains to. And this really gave me like a really better grasp on the things that I do, because as you guys know, that Less Nobodies focuses on crystals and herbal healing and aromatherapy and consultations and all those things like that. And a lot of the things that Less Nobodies does is actually just the 10th sphere. So go ahead and read those off.
Okay. The Baoxi flower therapy is the 10th sphere. The Bhakti yoga, if I said that right, sorry, the 9th sphere. The counseling is the 8th sphere. The creative visualization is the 9th sphere, the 8th sphere, and the 7th sphere. The Dianetics is the 9th sphere and the 8th sphere. The herbal magic is the 10th sphere. The hypnotherapy is the 9th to the 8th sphere. The jhana yoga is to the 2nd. Comedic initiation is from 10th all the way to 0.
Comedic initiation.
Okay. Kula yoga is on 10th all the way to 0. Mantra yoga is all the way to the 3rd or 10th.
Go ahead, keep on.
Magnesium is 9th. Menab is 4th to 0. Positive thinking is 8th. Prayer is 8th.
Cybernetics.
8th to 7th. And then Cimarron's 8th.
Sermons. That's like church.
Huh. Working with crystals is then 10th.
Okay, so that just gave you like a really good, that part right there gave me like a really good grasp on the things that we do. A lot of the religious practices that we have, a lot of the Wiccan and witchcraft, voodoo, etc., practices that we have, those are all in the 9th and 10th sphere. So they do work for those things. Some ailments only need, remedies for the 9th and 10th sphere, but not all illnesses rely on the 9th and 10th sphere. If you're looking to raise yourself, that's when you not do away with the crystals, but it is not crystal or herbal or prayer or sermon or mantra or medium oriented. And that brought a whole perspective to me, because not that I thought that crystals and stuff like that were on the first sphere, but I thought that it was a little bit higher than that. But that's cool, bring it to a different perspective and help me elevate myself in the things that I'm doing in my methods of healing and the things that I teach my children. So if you see the pattern, you'll notice that most of the things that are that deal with the higher self, when you start dealing with the higher self and remedies that are necessary for the higher self, that's when you start getting into yoga, which is supposed to be the joint of your mind, body, and soul. So I thought that was pretty cool. The book goes on to talk about the 3 classifications of life's problems. That is on page 219. Seker is the 3rd sphere. This is the divine faculty in charge of life force, Ra. And there are 2 fundamental phases of one's life term. You have, I wish I would have wrote this better.
There's the first one here, the second one is here, and the third one is
okay
here.
So read those for me.
Okay. The first and lowest level does not arise from conditions that are opposed to our identification with the Sar and the laws of Mat, but to our conditionings that are opposed to the contemplated objective or the dormancy of spiritual power to achieve the goal. They can thus be overcome without transcending one lower being. The second level of problems arise from conditions that are opposed to be our identification with Asar, with lies of Mat as well. Even if we have the ability to achieve the goal, success depends on living truth at the crossroads, which is spiritual mechanism, or transcending our anti-spiritual conditions. And then the third one is the third level of problems arise from the dormancy of our higher faculties, spheres 1 to 3. Can you be motivated to develop your spiritual powers for the sake of discovering and aiding God's divine plan of the world? This might require you to die to the vast amount of painfully acquired information and to interest accumulated from the heavy investment in your earthly social undertakings.
So the 3 classifications of life's problems go by the 10 spheres, and they're divided between 3. You have the sphere 1 and 3, and that's the 3rd level of problems, and it lives in the higher faculties, and that's being motivated to develop your spiritual powers. You have the 2nd level of problems, and that's in 4 to 6, 4 to 7, and that's when you have the ability to achieve a goal and be successful. But this is also when you reach the crossroads. If you guys remember from previous videos, when you're trying to reach your higher self, especially when we use the 2 case studies, I think that was last weekend. Jinx, I need you to when we use the case studies from the last ones, the 2 people that came into the healer and needed help, they had to deal with things when they were at a crossroad. And when you are at a crossroad, what it means is, what kind of decision are you going to make? Are you going to make a decision to bring yourself to your higher self, or are you going to make a decision that's easy to make? And a lot of people kind of mess up here, because with the religion, how it's taught to us is, when we're at a crossroads and we do wrong, we could say, oh, that was just my animal spirit or whatever, and God's going to forgive me. And that's not real life, because God is not some outward, spirit that's seeing all and judging all. God is within us. So is heaven, so is hell. So when you do things, when you transgress against others, or when you do wrong, you actually are mentally inward your own hell. So, not doing the right thing at a crossroads really does not benefit you at all whatsoever. And it's because of you. It's not because of something on the outside. And then you have the lowest level, and that arises from the dormancy of the spiritual power to achieve a goal. And these are the things that you can use the crystals and the herbs and the mediumistic. You can go to the psychic and stuff. These are the lower self, issues that people go through. Um, the chapter goes on to talk about Seker, which is the third sphere, the divine faculty in charge of the life force. I highlighted a section on page 223. It is amazing to see how people are aware of the confusion and disorder that follow from the lack of planning and structure, yet fail to realize that the same would happen in nature and in the world if the Supreme Being had not laid a plan to guide the lives of men and nations, as above, so below. So, if you're following my other vlogs on YouTube, I read this book called Girl Stop Apologizing. And one of the habits that she said that one must adopt for success is to start planning. Planning is so important. I do it. I've been trying to get my son to do it. I work overnight, so in the morning before I leave my job, what I do, I have like a little planner now. Before I was just writing on a regular piece of paper, and then I found my 2019 planner, and I'm like, oh shit.
She
Anyway,
would basically just plan out her day.
yeah.
And even if she didn't like get her whole list done, she would at least get the most important ones or some that gave her an achievement in her life or
Right.
pride at least.
Yeah. And when I write my list out of the things that I want to do for the day, I don't write it in a list of priorities, but just seeing it on the paper, it kind of like I can look at it and tell like, oh, it'll be easier if I did this first, or it'd be easier if I did this first. Like right now, I just came home from work, and this is the first thing that I'm getting done off my list because the smaller one is sleep, so it'll be easier to just get this done. So when you plan things out, it just makes it so much easier. It makes your day go smoother. I'd also talked to my mother about this because I feel like some days I get overly confident, like, you know what, I know what I'm going to do today, so I don't need to write it down. No, those are the days, especially when you need to write it down. So yeah, definitely plan things out. When you plan things out, it always, not always works out, but for the most part it works out, or it makes you feel less bad when it's written down on paper. You have a list of about 5 things to do and you cross out at least 3. That's something to be proud of. Shit, if you cross out 1, be thankful. I had read something earlier to every morning write down 3 things that you are grateful for from yourself. And I want to get in the habit of doing that because I'm very hard on myself and I don't give myself time to thank myself. One thing we cannot do is make the spiritual world a physical world. The physical is the lowest vibration, and we as the fallen beings come from the highest vibration, I say. Yes, definitely. Yes, I definitely agree with that. Far too often, and I don't like to blame things, but definitely with the religion and everything, how that's being taught, we're definitely taught to look at spiritual tools, spiritual resources, our spirit. We're being made to look at all that from a physical set of eyes, and that's not right. And that's why we are at a period now with our youth. They are denouncing religion, not realizing that there are a lot of gems of religion. It just wasn't taught correctly. It wasn't comprehended correctly. It needs to be retaught because it was miseducated. That's all. And because it has been miseducated, you have a lot of people misconstruing it and now denouncing it. And it's showing a lot in our actions. We are definitely separating ourselves from each other and from nature, and it's getting really scary. The more devices that we create, the more separate we're becoming. And because we didn't bother to learn our history or maintain our history, and then we have people who make it their life's purpose to keep our history from us, we are dooming ourselves to repeat it, as many civilizations before us were advanced in technology and were advanced in external and right brain things. But once again, they let the left brain be dormant, and they didn't keep hold to the spiritual as they were creating objects, and they led to their demise. I read a really good like a series of posts. Someone had inboxed me about how Pangea was all one, and then it was Mu in the middle, and Atlantis on the side, and so on and so forth, and basically explaining how history was, and so on and so forth. And that was a pretty interesting read. But go to page 225 and 226, because next the book covers the Mot and the laws of the indwelling self. The quote that I have highlighted on page 225, you want to read that for me?
Mm-hmm. The construction of all things and unfolding of all events are based on universal patterns underlying the activities of all natural forces. While some of the patterns underlying physical phenomena
Mm-hmm. You're right.
have been discovered and confined by Western scientists like chemistry and physics. Africans and other non-Western people have discovered the patterns governing our day-to-day, discovered and
Okay, so
uh,
the construction of all things and the unfolding of all events are based on universal patterns. They underlie the activities of all natural forces. And while some of the patterns underlying physical phenomena has been discovered and codified by Western scientists, examples that they give is chemistry and physics. Africans and other non-Western people have discovered and codified the patterns govern our day-to-day existence and spiritual development. This is true. This is how a lot of the I guess, conspiracy theorists, if you will, come into play. Um, I hate the fact that, people that actually see patterns and are able to detect, future events from patterns are seen as conspiracy theorists, because right now I'm taking classes to be a data analyst or whatever. And that's exactly how they teach it to you. Taking these online classes for data analysis has taught me that you do study patterns, and you study those patterns, and that's how you predict, future, things within a business or things within a website or marketing or so on and so forth. And to discredit people who utilize the same methods on a spiritual sense or on an everyday physical sense is an issue, because how can you use it for, computers and things like that and not apply it to all? And then we also apply it to weather. We also apply it to marketing, and we also apply it to the political climate and all those things. But when it comes to spirituality, we fail in that department, and we have to do better. We should want more for ourselves and expect more from each other. Accountability was the theme these past 2 weeks for me and myself and mine. On page 226, I highlighted the quote, "An abundance of life force, which is acquired through proper diet, adequate exercise, and the avoidance of sensual excess, is required for developing the strength to live truth. The implications of this fact are that as long as people are kept ignorant of how to cultivate their life force, and worse, kept indulging in lifestyle characterized by wrong diet, sexual excess, etc., they will never intuit, understand, or find the strength to live truth. Society must then be doomed to ever-deepening decadence. Salvation, they teach, can supposedly be achieved by asking for God's forgiveness after a life of debauchery." This was something that I had mentioned before, like, people are doing whatever they want and living with the idea that all I have to do is ask for forgiveness and I'll be forgiven, and that's not how it works. While people are not following the natural order of avoiding, excessive eating and excessive sexual activity, and people basically being driven by their animated spirit, their lower self. When you are being driven, and I make a joke, and it's a terrible joke. It shouldn't be a joke. It's serious. Like, holding people accountable. Stop living off of your root chakra. Like, when you are living your life and you're allowing your root chakra to determine all and to make all the decisions for you, you are not living right, and you are not living at your higher self. You need to elevate yourself. And the thing that, makes people super comfortable with living through their root chakra is the religion says that it's okay. Government says that it's okay. If I ask God for forgiveness, it'll be okay. You have a lot of people that are miseducating themselves through religion and excusing themselves for their root chakra activity. Excessive sexual activity is definitely one of them. That is definitely a big problem. We look at people who tell us to monitor ourselves sexually as people trying to infringe on us or characterize us or this, that, and the third, and that's not the case. You're supposed to have self-discipline. You're supposed to be able to tell yourself, no, this is the God in you. And to just be like, oh, I'm going to, have sex with a whole bunch of people. I'm going to eat whatever I want. I'm going to smoke. I'm going to drink. To say you're going to do those things and just ask God for his forgiveness, you're not realizing that God is within you. He's not outside. So you asking yourself for forgiveness while you keep disrespecting your temple, that doesn't work. You're still going to get sick. You're still going to attract, ungodly women that do like disastrous shit. Like you're still going to get ill. You're still, going to go broke paying for all that food that you shouldn't be eating, or smoking all that shit you shouldn't be smoking. So like, you can ask for forgiveness, but like you're not going to get it because you're still doing what you're doing. You have to forgive yourself. And when you forgive yourself and you apologize to yourself, apology means I'm not going to continue the behavior. So we have to change how we look at God. It's not on the outside, it's on the inside. So the quote that I highlighted on page 227 says, so moving on to the next deity is Haru Kuhuti. And this is the divine principle that safeguards our existence from injustices of others. Reap what you sow. And the quote that I highlighted on there was, while Haru corresponds to the steady supply of noradrenaline, that enables us to carry out all activities of externalization, Haru Kuhuti corresponds to the extreme surges of adrenaline that support our aggressive sexual arousal and immune responses. In the comedic tradition, it is the form in which Haru fights against Set in order to regain the throne control over one's life that is latter usurped. The seeming contradiction that arises from considering Haru Buhutet a former Haru is cleared up when we realize that ultimately there is only one deity in the world with different faculties. So there is only one deity, and according to Metu Neter, that's Asar. Moving on to Haru. Haru corresponds to our will, the freedom to follow or reject divine law, and our emotions. Will does not have power, it delegates. Will prevents emotions from controlling. Het Haru, all that strikes us as being beautiful harmoniously. This natural intelligence manifests itself as artistic expression, social grace, charm, scientific invention, and pleasure seeking. It sits in the gonads of the human body. It controls arousal, pain, and pleasure sensations, and are expressions of the arousal of the life force Ra. Images plus aroused life force plus trance equals spiritual realization. So I went to page 230 and I highlighted what I just said.
Images and aroused life force Ra. Trance, which is mediumistic or waking, equals spiritual realization, mundane or spiritual.
So this goes to the chapters of manifestation and meditation that we spoke on a couple weeks ago. When you are in meditation or you are trying to manifest something, you close your eyes, you think of the images. The images can be found in the appendix in the back of the book. Aroused life form, we went over that, different ways to arouse this life force is through singing, dancing, making yourself happy, which is what is done in church, and also through sexual activity, and then mediumistic trance. And this brings you to spiritual realization. This is why I'm trying to think of the words that I'm trying to put together. This is why sex should be done in moderation and with purpose. I know it doesn't always happen that way, but it should. In an African cultural setting, harem aket was a model for the African family values. It provided a setting which promoted the ideal of goodness overcoming the forces of evil. The Sphinx, on the other hand, tells the story of Oedipus and a dysfunctional European family. Theirs is a story of incest, murder, and suicide. I did not know that the Sphinx was tied with Oedipus. So do you know the story of Oedipus?
No,
He was in love with his mother. And that's all I know in a nutshell. He was in love with his mother. And I think once he realized it was his mom, he snatched his eyes out or something. The Greek, well, I was really into Greek mythology when I was in high school, in middle school. That was my thing. Because I didn't have this. I didn't have African mythology. That was not a concept to me. I only learned about Greek and Roman mythology.
But they're still cool to listen to stories.
Yeah, and then when even then, so I only learned about Egyptian mythology, and then yeah, that's it. So my knowledge was kind of limited to what was taught to me, but It's all about self-knowledge. It's all about the desire to want to teach yourself. And that's when you really start to learn. Moving on, Sebek, a verbal communication is left-brained. Right is holy intelligence. Left is the animal soul. The faculty that enables us to separate and label parts of a whole. All set, the embodiment of intuition and instincts that govern our ability to care for and nurture others. People who are strong in this are protective, caring, and nurturing. Women have lower metabolism, but a higher parasympathetic output. And this governs reproduction, gestation, and trance states, which is why it is said that women are especially Black women, are the closest to God because of this that we have. Achieving a goal with will and the life force of Ra, you can achieve a goal. I think this is the part, I think this is the page, I'm sorry. I think this is the page where they also talk about how, okay, so on page 233, I highlighted a quote. Activities that overstimulate the sympathetic, which is military, hunting, and those requiring psychic aggressiveness, or diminish the capacity of the parasympathetic functions, were discouraged in women. So, women not being in certain roles, it wasn't because women were seen as inferior or not equal. It's because women have parasympathetic functions and they are necessary to keep intact. And when you are in military roles or different roles that encourage and teach and stimulate that psychic aggressiveness in women, you have to be mindful of the fact that a woman is born with every egg that she'll ever give life to when she is born. So whatever temperaments that this woman adores throughout her life up until the time that she gives life to one of those eggs, that affects the eggs that are in her body. So it's necessary to treat women with a certain level of care, daintiness, and so on and so forth. And that's why women were in certain positions, and it had nothing to do with inequality. It had nothing to do with the idea that women can't do what men can do. It had to do with the idea that women bring something different to the table, and what they bring to the table is important and it should be cared for, just like men bring something to the table, and what men bring to the table is important and should be cared for.
But you still should allow them to do what they need to or do what they want.
I mean, yeah, do what you want, but be mindful of what you're doing to yourself psychically and spiritually when you do it. Not everything is for you. I'm a woman. I can admit that not everything is for me, and I don't want to do everything because I recognize my energy as a woman, and I don't want to manipulate that to try to make myself aggressive or try to make myself more manly or equal to a man. I don't need that. I know that we're not. I know that we're equal, but I know we are not. We complete each other. It's not a competition. Anyway. So the toll to be paid is the reduction of the quality of childbearing, social peace and harmony, and spiritual inspiration. This is true because if you think about ever since like women started coming into these positions and started being more aggressive and stuff, it affects the home. It affects, now we have, people that are younger than me. They are a part of my generation, but they're younger than me. They don't want to have kids. They don't want to have a family. And the ones that do have kids aren't really caring for their kids in a proper manner. They're selfish. They're constantly throwing their kids on other people. I'm not saying everybody. I'm saying enough to where our kids are growing up without guidance. And there's no longer a village. There used to be a village to raise your kids within. There used to be people that will openly, willingly take your kids. But now we have these women who don't want to be mothers, who don't want to be grandmothers, who don't want to watch anybody's kids, who don't want to be bothered. They want to go out and party, drink, and smoke. They want to work all day. They want to make money, this, that, and the third. Yeah, and it does have a spiritual effect on people. It does have an energy effect. Whatever is happening to the woman affects the household, despite how, people want to dismiss that and not be accountable for things. You have to be accountable for that. All magic has a price. You want this level of equality in the workforce and in society or whatever. It comes at the price of the household and childbearing. And understand that our children are our future and they do need nurturing from their mother. It's necessary just as much as they need discipline from the father. But with the mother, taking on the mentality that she has been taking on over these last few, generations, centuries, and so on and so forth, it does affect the man's presence in the house, and it is affecting the temperament of the children. And this is a group effort. This is not pointing fingers at anyone. This is no one person's fault. This is centuries and generations in the making. So all that like blame game stuff that people are doing, like men and women and stuff like this, so unnecessary, and it's not healing. It's not going to heal anything. Moving forward, Seb, Jeb, or Geb, I forget, God of the earth. Earth is a living thing, and the title is Gaia. Our earthly life is the embryonic stage of our spiritual development. I had a random conversation about this, about people on Earth being in embryo, like Earth being like a mother's womb, and us being in here, and then when we pass over, we're actually going into a new life. We're being reborn. I think it's a pretty cool thought. I highlighted a quote on the bottom of page 235. A proof of spiritual development is the ability to arise above the emotional and sensual influences, which, after all, are expressions of the animal, earthly part of the being. The ability to learn independently of externals from within. The ability to control or influence earthly events in our bodies and environment through the power of our life force at the command of our will. So once you're able to manipulate the energy around you, the energy within you, that is a sign of spiritual development. And right now we are in the embryonic stage, so we're not there yet. Sheps and Dark Deceased, spiritual philosophy equals the meaning of life and death, which comes from communicating with ancestors. Ancestors provide kinship to group together millions, which helps maintain law and order without the police and systems. Okay, so with this, I do have ancestors that I celebrate. Harriet Tubman is my number one go-to though. I go to her for almost everything. I mean, I know people have like how they feel about Jesus, but I still talk to, I still, the image of Jesus, not necessarily like him in the Christian Bible sense. I know that's a bit contradictory, but I think that the image of Jesus, like a being at the zero sphere of consciousness, giving without expectation, healing people without expectation, always turning the other cheek, forgiving unconditionally and loving unconditionally, that resonated with me. So it's not necessarily Jesus as far as the story in the Bible, but it's just the image of him and what he represents to me means a lot to me. But definitely Harriet Tubman is the number one because I fucks with the attitude. And Zora Neale Hurston, Maya Angelou, definitely because I am a writer.
Who is Zora?
Zora Neale Hurston. She wrote. She's a writer. She's a very good writer. I actually have one of her books. Their Eyes Were Watching God. I'm gonna read that again, but she's a really good author. Yeah. So communicating with the ancestors, having relationships with the ancestors, learning about the culture, the rules and regulations of the ancestors, how they moved and stuff like that. It does set a law and order to you within. And just like the book talked about in the earlier chapters, when you have like laws in a book, laws and police don't police people. Obviously, you still have people committing crimes, you still have people going out of their way not to get caught, you still have people going to jail, etc., etc. And why is that? Because these people are not going within and reaching their higher level of consciousness. They're not going within and reaching, what is that, the sixth or fifth sphere that talks about law and order and justice. They're not going within themselves to reach that level. When they go to jail, they're not being rehabilitated to go inward and reach themselves. Some of them are, and we do have a stereotypical joke around the community about how the Black guy goes to jail and comes out like this super spiritual person. But that is nothing to make fun of. That's actually something to celebrate, because that is someone being rehabilitated and going inward to create his own laws, because outward laws are not going to stop someone from doing something. It's just not. I take that to heart, especially with how I parent. I can discipline my children all day, but until they internalize what I'm trying to teach them, until they see the benefit of what I'm trying to teach them, or they have to internalize it to follow it. Otherwise, they're just going to think of ways not to get caught. I was the same way. And I'm pretty sure many other people, if they go back to their childhood, they were the same way as well. Okay, you can't reference Christianity with spirituality. It won't work. Why? Because you can't serve two masters. Respect. I don't, but my image of Jesus is not, it's not in that sense. Like, I respect where you're
she
coming
doesn't
from.
serve him.
Yeah, I
It's
don't
more
serve
like
him.
she just like takes him as a reference of like just being a.
It's more of a reference of how I want to be as a person when I go out into the world. I want to love people unconditionally. I want to be emotionally detached, to turn the other cheek. I want to, I want to give without expectation. That's a person I strive to be. When I look at the story of Jesus, I think of the 10 spheres of life, and I think about how each like section of his life is like a sphere in itself. But that's just me. That's not for everybody. I choose to see patterns in my own way. That is my pattern. I was able to see the pattern in what was given to us about Jesus. And I see the same pattern in other religious figures. And I see the same pattern with the tree of life here. That's me looking at patterns. I'm a pattern person. But I get like the emotional attachment to Christianity and to Jesus. And as soon as you say, something Christian wise or whatever, people kind of like get angry and go up in arms, and that's not my intentions. My intentions are good, but I do empathize with that. I understand that. Neckbet and watch it. I'm gonna learn how to pronounce these.
Make a bet and watch it.
You tried.
Make a bet and watch it.
Okay, good. The science for manipulating the two magnetic forces which form the essence of all psychic powers. Nekabek is an negative northern pole, and this represents the white crown. And Wachet is electropositive, and this is southern pole, red crown. Consciousness rises to the left. This is my left. I was just playing. And shines on the right. Ara is meeting point of both of these points. The right side of the brain is speechless. This is the symbol of motherhood. Mutt is bluish gray, cool, electronegative. Also the moon. Wachet is head of cobra. It is warm. It's reddish orange, and it's electropositive in left. This is also masculine in the sun. A, physic power is imperative. Oh, psychic power is imperative. And B, these two forces rule domestic policy. Point 3, planetary hours. Okay, so I went to page 239.
I thought it said right here 240.
Yeah, but I got 239 right here too.
Right. I see these. That's all I see.
Okay. So page 240 goes on to talk about okay. You can read that if you want to. We'll start at slow.
Okay.
This is talking about the two magnetic forces which form the essence of all psychic powers. So he's gonna read the quote that I highlighted on page 238. Go ahead.
I'm gonna slow downward paces of strong magnets, force of 10 pounds and up, loose to the skin but not touching, produced insensitivities and sensation of agreeable coolness from one pole and the disagreeable warmth from the other pole. In some cases, the energy from either pole was so strong that it caused pain, spasm, nausea, jerking of the body, faintness, and etc. The warm current, which is reddish-orange, as seen as clairvoyantly, right?
Clairvoyantly.
Is generated by the southern or
electropositive
pole of the magnet. Its predominance at the left side of the body. Its metals: alkaline, pH, moonlight, The electropositive elements, the southern node of the moon, Coda, Draconos, et the dragon's tail. The cool current, which is bluish-gray, is generated by the northern, or electronegative pole, and predominates in the right side of the body. Melatinoids, acids, pH, sunlight, light, heat, electronegative elements. The northern node of the moon, Capot Nagnus, Dragonox, the dragon's head, Rahu. It is important to note that these two currents correspond to the Earth's southern and north magnetic poles, and hence to the electromagnetic powers flowing through the meridians of the Earth. Along with the east and west currents, they play major shaping roles in electromagnetic processes going in all atoms in their chemical and electrophysical activities. What's wrong?
Okay. So this chapter just what he just read, it just elaborated on what I just said about the electromagnetic poles. It was an experiment. You put 10, was it 10 10 pounds and up of a magnet over top of your body, and you could either get an extreme warmth or an extreme coldness. And of course, as above, so is below. So the earth is the same way, with the electromagnetic force and having a positive side and a negative side. And of course, on both sides is two different things. You have warmth, heat, you have blue on one side, red on the other side. And so on and so forth. Chapter 18. Now we're moving to the Metu, which are fundamental principles. This is kind of like the introductory to the Metu Neter tarot cards. I really want these cards.
But aren't they easy to get? You said they only cost like 40 or 30.
No, they weren't easy to get. Like where I found them at, like they're not even they weren't even really on the website. It was kind of like sold out. I have to find them because I want them. I want a mission now. So I'm just gonna go over them, and as I go over them, what I want you to do is you're gonna read the spiritual. So the fundamental principles is like the overall principles, and then you have what a spiritual person would do. I want to say this is maybe if the card was flipped right side up, and then if the card was flipped on reverse, you would have what an unlightened would do. And that's basically, explaining the different cards. It also goes on to talk about the tree of life as a guide to planning. Did I write that on? Yes. So, okay. So, Amen. This is an infinite source of the life force and spiritual matter. For successful destinies, one must realize our talents are not private. One must realize our talents are not private property. The universe is the source of all individual experiences. Its interests cannot be separated per person. I resonated with this because I remember the first time I ever painted. I painted at a party. I went to the party, one of my old college friends or whatever invited me to. And this guy came up to me. He was like, what you're painting is like so dope. And this was my first time. And I was like, I never did this before. And he was asking me like, what else I do? Because obviously I do other art. I never know when someone's flirting with me or not. So I just have conversation. But anyway, so I'm telling him or whatever. And he's like, you're mad selfish because you have all these gifts and you could do all these things and you're keeping it to yourself. And I'm like, well, what are you talking about? They're my gifts. Like, I was a lot more self-conscious than what I am now. I still am pretty self-conscious. I don't like to talk about myself too much. I don't really like to talk about like the stuff that I'm doing because I feel like it's arrogant, kind of egotistical. And I read in a book, one of the books that I just read, that it's not okay to be that way because that's also hiding your gifts when you don't talk about yourself and you don't talk about the things that you're doing. So I'm, trying to work my mind around talking about myself. But this is just getting around to the fact that When you have gifts and you have abilities and you keep them to yourselves, it's selfish. The gifts that you have don't belong to you. The gifts God gave you, he gave you for a reason, for you to share with other people. If you are a manifestation of God, you never know what God manifested in you was supposed to do for the other manifestations around you. By me doing the things that I do, I never realized how many people pay attention to me. I have a lot of younger siblings, and I never realized how much, the things I say and do really like stick to my younger siblings. And that means so much to me because I just never, I don't put myself on that pedestal. And so, to see, somebody put me on that pedestal is like pretty fucking dope. And then like, I get a lot of good feedback from other people. So that makes me feel good. Like I'm doing something, for the world. And I tell you all the time to stop keeping your gifts to yourself. Because your interests, it can't be separated per person because we're all one. Now, going to the tarot cards, if you flip it on the regular side, this is the spiritual side. An enlightened will knows that all things, which is life, the life force, the potentials to achieve, the materials for success, etc., come from heaven, which is infinite in its potential to give. An unenlightened person will believe that the earthly realm is the source of all things, and therefore take stock of the available material resources to calculate what it can and cannot achieve. It thus limits its potential to achieve, and out of a sense of limitation, lays a foundation for competition and conflict with others. Steve Harvey said something crazy one time. He was like, if money is your obstacle, then you don't have any obstacles. And that shit pissed me off, because I don't have a lot of money. And I'm like, how dare this rich man say if money is an obstacle, then it's not an obstacle. But he was right. When you make material items your obstacle, it does limit you. When you only go through external knowledge, like how we read in the previous chapters about learning from people with limited knowledge, or going to external like books and stuff, when you go to external means for knowledge, that knowledge is limited because it's written and reiterated by a limited individual. So when you go through the limits of this earthly presence, you're not going to achieve your full potential. You're not going to achieve everything you want to achieve. This will be a lot easier if more of us adopted this mindset at the same time, but it is possible, and we watch people achieve it every day. Asar is the next one, and this is the unifying force of all factors of individuated existence. It pushes us to honor the universal interests. You want to read the card. If you flip the card upright, this is what it is.
An alignment with Haru plus.
An enlightened will know. You can just.
Okay. An enlightened will knows that all successful undertakings, accomplishments that do not create harm, spiritual or mundane in other ways, are performed not by the person but by the indwelling intelligence, the self Asar.
So when you are doing right, it's not necessarily you, it is the God within you. And Steve Harvey's logic is white logic. Yeah, facts. I don't really mess with Steve Harvey like that anymore, but that one time he said that really bothered me, and then it took a lot of growth for it not to bother me anymore, because I was hooked on material things. Like, I feel like money controls everything I can do around me, and that limits myself. And so, not looking at Steve Harvey as a person, but just looking at that specific quote, he was right. When you allow material things to get in your way, those material things aren't really in your way. It's you. So, going back to Asar, this, when you flip the card over, you know that all successful undertakings, the ones that don't harm or spiritual or mundane in any way, they're not performed by the person, but by the indwelling intelligence. So it is God performing those things, and that, gives me a perspective. It's crazy, like a lot of the things that we do that is still in touch with like our divine culture, but we don't really recognize it. It was one book that I read called New Orleans Voodoo, and it talks about all the present day religions and how, African spiritualism has transformed a lot of them. And we don't even realize it or recognize it because, we detached ourselves from it. But moving on from that, it was just like the idea that every time someone obtains something, they, thank God, or they perform something, they thank God first. And I always get mad at people, and I always tell people, hey, if you shouldn't thank God for material accumulation, because that's not what God wants. God doesn't want you to accumulate material things. Those things are man-made. That's what man wants you to do, because that helps capitalism and consumerism. God just wants you to fulfill your purpose and use and allow him to use you to be useful to other people and beings in this realm. But nobody listens to me. Anyway, so if you flip it upside down, an enlightened individual believes that his natal personality is his identity. These are people that, this is me, because I do identify with being a Virgo and being an earth sign and stuff like that. But, I try not to let that guide like my whole life. I try not to be that person to be like, oh, that's just me, that's who I am. Because that is celebrating and accepting your lower self as your only self. And you actually have more selves. As a result, he is unable to transcend his characteristics in order to awaken his infinite potential of being to meet the infinite variety of situations confronting him. When you allow yourself to hold on to this one characteristic or this one personality, you prevent yourself from being, other people that you need to be in different situations. The wording might sound crazy because mentally, like, that's a crazy ass concept. Like, how do you change the person you are? But I could say that I'm a fairly adaptable person. Like, I can be in a room of different, characters in different spaces and, acclimate to, the room. I can read the room and stuff like that. And a lot of people can do that. And the ability to do that is taking on a different person. Whereas in a certain climate, you would have a nasty ass attitude, or you would be profane, or da-da-da. And then in another environment, you're kind of, you perform a little differently. You're supposed to be able to do that. Failure comes when life demands that you manifest one of the other 6 personalities dormant within your spirit, and you can't, because you're convinced that you are a natal person. So when you convince yourself, hey, this is who I am, that's it, you're limiting yourself, and you're telling yourself you can't do things, and you could possibly holding yourself back. And a lot of people who probably would be watching you or should be inspired by you or motivated by you, you're taking away all their blessings too, because they probably need to see you do what you do so they can do what they do. I take that very heavy, because it took a really long time for me to get around to doing videos. I've had this idea of doing a book club and doing a vlog for like 6-7 years now. I've been wanting to do this, but I didn't want to do it alone. See, I'm still not doing it alone. But I didn't want to do it alone because I was very self-conscious, and I'm like, bro, nobody wants to just like sit and listen to me talk and stuff like that. But I love reading books. And this was something that I've always loved ever since I was a little girl. And I just wanted to share the stuff that I read. So I had to change, some things about me and stop limiting myself to things that I've accepted that I'm only capable of doing. And I've had to do that with a lot of things, with my parenting, with my relationship, with me being a daughter, to my parents. I had to change myself and the things that I, clung to and said was my personality. I'm just not going to do that because that's not who I am. Like, you got to stop doing that to yourself, because you're stunting your own growth. Moving to the next one, Tahuti. This the source of intuition that shows how to achieve equilibrium between interests of the whole and the person. When you flip it the right side up, the card, you want to read this one?
An enlightenment with knowns that every choice and decision affecting the course of our lives must be guided by the wisdom of the Supreme Being. He consults high oracles and sits humbly at the feet of sage.
Mm-hmm. And you must intuit how each part fits within the whole, its place in time, which phase and space, its value, the priorities, the scope. So.
But then the negative part.
The negative one.
An enlightenment individual believes that the body of information that he has acquired throughout his life and the rationalization, therefore, should be bias of the choices and decisions affecting the course of his life.
Okay. So in this one, When you're enlightened, you're going to the spirit, and you know that every choice and decision must be guided by wisdom of the supreme being. But when you're not, you think that all your life decisions are just you alone and based on decisions that you make, and that's not real life. It's not about you. It's not about you. You are living your reality and your journey, but it's not about you. I'm learning that, my selfish ass. I don't necessarily want it to be about me, but I want to achieve the things that I want to achieve. And I won't say convince myself, but I am convinced that what I want to achieve is a betterment for many people and not just me. It's not a selfish manifestation that I'm trying to manifest. I really want like a community center, and I really want to help people reach like holistic health and stuff like that. So like that's my goal. Moving forward to Secker. This provides structural framework that orders coming into being and development to achieve whole and personal interest equilibrium. And an enlightened will know that before taking action on a decision, there must be knowledge of the underlying structure, which is the plan governing what must be done. As the structure framework of all events are laid down by the deities and spirits, one does not therefore make up a plan. Instead, the thought process are stilled in order to sense and intuit the structural framework created by spiritual agencies. This goes back to like, what was it, last week when we were talking about thinking and thought? A lot of things that we like to take credit for and say, oh, that was just me. I thought that. It's not really you thinking that. I know a lot of people like to make fun of the concept of God and say, oh, I never heard him talking to me, because they're expecting some like outside voice to talk to them. But it's that voice within, those random thoughts you get, those streams of thoughts. I get them all the time. I go into my head a lot. When I was younger, I did like
fiddle with your body in your head.
Yeah, I talk to myself a lot, talked in my head a lot. So like now where I'm at in life, like that stuff comes effortless to me, to the point where now I don't know how to shut my mind off. Like meditating is so hard for me because I don't know how to turn the noises off, and it's very tiring. Like, I'm tired all the time
for a long while.
Yeah. So if anybody has any methods on how to shut it the fuck up sometimes.
Think of water. Think of a droplet on the water. Muffle it with that sound. Or like, just think of like a wonderful sound you like, and just muffle it over whatever you're hearing.
I've tried that, and I just start thinking about why I like the sound, and I start going on a tangent about that. An unenlightened individual believes that the purpose of his cleverness is to ease the way of his goals at the expense of others. So, oh no, I read the wrong one. An unenlightened individual is ignorant of or does not believe in, he lacks direct experience in the fact that deities and spirits control the course of events for the purpose of establishing and maintaining order in the world. Thus, his plans are based on concepts for which there are no objective and counterparts. So this is from someone not planning or going through his own plan and understanding. And this is why I like, please don't be mad at me, but this is why like I really like coincide this stuff with my upbringing in a Methodist home, like Methodist church or whatever, because a lot of this stuff I've heard before, about like not leading unto your own understanding, and about accepting the fact that it's not your plan and it's not about you, accepting the fact that everything is one, and it you can't keep your gifts and stuff to yourself, and your goals are not about what you want to achieve, but what God wants you to achieve, what the manifestations around you need you to achieve. Like, I mean, that's just me though. Anyway, moving forward. Ma is the knowledge of law, and it shows he has the options to accept, reject. Following it brings interest, success. Now, if you read it from an enlightened point of view, you don't have to read the whole, well, yeah, just read up to there.
Yeah. An enlightened will is one that has been taught by the laws that have been followed in order to receive the beneficent gifts.
My back.
Go ahead.
the beneficent gifts of heaven, Amenta. Because of its full understanding of the law of heaven, it does not chafe itself in restless rebellion against the constraints suggested by the law. It knows the law guarantees all things in its day in the sun.
Okay, so this is about like the inner laws that you set for yourself. Um, I I think I used the example last time we talked about Ma and the inner laws. There's this show called The New Negroes, and in this show they have MF Doom.
The TV's not on.
Okay.
Go on to my class.
Okay.
Okay, just
Go ahead. They have this song called by MF Doom, and he's like a police inside of his head, and it's just about policing yourself and going inward to police yourself. So that's basically what this is understanding that the law of heaven does not chafe itself in the restless rebellion against the constraints suggested by law. It knows that the law guarantees all things is day in the sun. If I were a newly arrived being from another planet and were to say to you, I observed people in New York for 3 months and therefore concluded that light clothing is their mode of dress, would you correct me by pointing out that although my thinking was logically correct, my conclusion was not true? Why? Obviously, I have only observed a part of the whole, while you have observed New Yorkers through all the seasons. Mott corresponds, therefore, to the ability to understand the interdependence and interrelationship between the parts and the whole and with each other through the use of abstract analogies. It is a logical process that enables the testing of the truth and premise. And an unenlightened individual is ignorant of or does not believe in divine law. His spirituality, unlawful behavior brings him thus into conflict with others and many factors opposing his will. This is running rampant in the world today with this newer generation. I think a lot of people are not believing in divine law, and they do believe that they can do whatever they want, however they want, whenever they want. And they will argue you down. And now we have the political climate going on now where you can't even speak on people not following divine law. Like it's hate speech now, it's phobia. And I always thought that phobia was a word derived from fear, not necessarily hate, but I guess that's been changed, or that's the way it always was. I don't know. But I always thought phobia was fear, not hate. But now everything is like a phobia. And so you can't speak on people not, believing in divine law. And I think that's trash. And I think that's allowing a lot of things to run rampant. I think that's allowing people to accept a lot of things that shouldn't be accepted, because we have to hold each other accountable. It's important. We have to hold ourselves accountable because it's important. It's important for our survival as beings here. It's important for the future generations that have to come here. I know a lot of people are, really selfish in their walk, and they just think about themselves and their kids. But what about your grandkids? What about their kids? Like, think about the climate that you're leaving behind to them, not just in a weather sense, but also how people are treating each other, the law, external laws, the way the government system is set up, the way the social system is set up right now. A lot of things are just out of whack, and we're leaving this to our children, and it's not okay. Harukuhuri, abstract distinction between pattern of your undertaking and those that are analogous. And an enlightened will know that the true purpose of the offensive power of the supreme being is not to punish the offenders of the laws of heaven, but to protect those who uphold it. It secures its objectives against the obstruction by others by treating them according to Mott. When parts and phases are seen from the perspective of the whole, we are able to see their complementary relationship. When they are viewed on a specific level, we can only see their antagonistic relationship. For example, the watery and fiery phases of an event are cooperative when seen from a holistic perspective, and antagonistic. They check and destroy each other when seen on their level. Harukuhuri is therefore the ability to understand the qualities that separate parts of a whole. However integral they are to the latter. It is achieved through the perception of abstract qualities and things, and it enables you to maintain your individuality by realizing that although all things are parts of a whole, they have been individuated for the purpose of carrying out a specific set of functions. An enlightened individual is ignorant of the fact that being fair to others, even at the cost of personal harm and loss, will secure divine protection. By succumbing to the fallacy that there are times when divine law can and must be set aside for the sake of survival, he sets in motion the pendulum of justice, which must in time swing back and visit its wrath upon him. Oh yeah, the pendulum is definitely a great analogy of karma. When you swing the pendulum, it definitely comes back to you. You're just waiting on your turn. Is ignorant of the fact that being fair to others, even at the cost of personal harm or loss, will secure divine protection. So there are times where you do have to set divine law aside. Oh, I had posted this earlier. Dang, foreshadowing my own day. So I think it was evil should not be ignored. It should be destroyed. And all that don't judge me bullshit is bullshit. That's just what I just said about holding yourselves and holding each other accountable. While we do have the divine law, and the divine law is there for those who uphold it, and the supreme being protects those who uphold it, it is still up to us to hold each other accountable. Just how we have the court system, we have war, we have police, which all three of those elements need to be used for the greater good instead of what they've been used for. They've actually been used more negatively now than ever. But we have those things in place because sometimes we do have to separate ourselves from divine law and make shit pop on our own, and that's important. A lot of us, and that's one of the ideas of wait and pray. You can't wait and pray for everything. Sometimes you got to get up and you got to do some shit. But like how we read in a couple weeks ago about manifestation and meditation and reaching, your higher self, when you separate yourself from emotions, you are no longer driven by fear. I had this conversation with my sister about like that Netflix movie, When They See Us. I don't want to watch it. I watched the first episode and a half. I understand. I empathize with the Black man. I get everything. At the same token, I know when I'm being emotionally manipulated, and I'm not going to let anybody or anything emotionally manipulate me into doing or feeling something. And a lot of things that are on TV or on Facebook and stuff emotionally manipulate people to feel afraid or anxious. We've seen so many videos of cops shooting people that now when we see a cop, you feel something, don't you? When you're about to get pulled over, you feel something now, don't you? You've been programmed to feel those things. You've been programmed to feel afraid. You've been programmed to feel anxious. You've been programmed to feel those things when in certain situations. And the fact that we can't separate ourselves from our emotions, it prevents us from doing things and performing certain things that need to be performed and sought through. When you're afraid of, people, and fear and anxiety has been instilled in you, you're not effective. You've limited yourself because you're saying, this is my person. This is who I am. This is, I'm afraid. I have anxiety. I have depression. I have these things. I'm not a warrior. I can't fight for the people. I can't go to war. I can't you're limiting yourself. And we have to stop doing that as a unit, because that's not helping us at all, obviously. Where I lost my place. Harukuhudi, which is abstract distinction between pattern of your undertaking and those that are analogous. You want to read this one? Where is it? There you go.
An enlightened will knows that the true purpose of the offensive power of the Supreme Being is not to punish the offenders of the law of heaven, but to protect those who uphold it. It secures its objectives against the obstruction by others by treating them according to that.
You got it?
Yeah.
And an enlightened individual
An enlightened individual is arrogant of the fact
Ignorant.
It's ignorant of the fact that being fair to others, even at the cost of personal harm and loss, will secure divine protection. But succumbing to this
Oh, we
fallacy
just read this one.
that there are times when divine law can or must be aside for sake of survival, he sets in motion of the pendulum of justice. We already read this one.
Yeah, we already read this
Now,
one.
are we doing Hetzeru? Because I feel like we didn't do that.
Yeah. Sex indulged in moderation with one's identity transferred to the indwelling intelligence is a chief means to arousing the life force to enable one to achieve their goals. So, my bad. I lost my place, y'all.
You're too slow.
An enlightened will know that actions and undertakings must begin in the freedom from emotional influences. Ultimately, no sane person is ever compelled to act. He is either ignorant of his intrinsic freedom to choose to follow or reject the impulses from the animal part of his spirit, which are sensual cravings and emotions, or he chooses not to follow the law of heaven Mach, which is always applied to him with the gentleness of a feather. He therefore enlightens himself regarding the true nature and purpose of the will, and the means of effectively using it, by allowing the higher values to lead over emotional forces. It is the ability to understand the abstract and concrete, unifying, separating functions of all spheres and their coordination of carrying out the undertaking. If you are deficient in these abilities, you must seek the assistance of one who meets the criteria. As these positions, the people who could best assist you are those who are successful in the roles of supervisors, heads of households, bosses, kings, presidents, etc. In all cases, whether you are capable or not, your success depends on receiving counsel from someone above you. It is important then to cultivate respect for elders, authorities, and masters in particular fields or of life matters. Meditating on the Heka or Haru will attract such persons to you. An unenlightened person is ignorant that all inducers of pleasure are means of arousing the life force. He thus fails to cultivate or moderate the indulgence of pleasure, and as a result fails due to lack of vital force. He then speaks ignorantly of weakness of will, poor health, poor memory, and so on. His failure is compounded by his ignorance of the function of images as molds for physical events. He gives power of realization to unwanted or intolerable events by dwelling on them in emotionally and centrally charged visualizations. This is learned helplessness. This is the acceptance of personality. This is the acceptance of following your animal spirit. This is the acceptance of the physical limitations and the physical personality characteristics. This is when you accept those things and say that's you. Like, oh, I'm promiscuous. Oh, I do this. Oh, I smoke. Oh, I drink. Oh, I got a nasty attitude. Oh, I like to fight. When you accept these things as your person, you are being ignorant of your full capability. You're allowing yourself to be driven by your lower self. You got to elevate yourself. We're almost done this. Almost. Sorry it's taking so long. Sabek is the unification of all parts of a problem before solving. It's the unification of logical intellect by divine law. An enlightened will know that true purpose of cleverness, what passes for intelligence in the West and education, knowledge of techniques, details of steps, etc., are for easing the way. Example, for the purpose of carrying out tasks with a minimum of effort and time and maximum results. Someone who is not enlightened will believe that the purpose of his cleverness is to ease the way of his goals at the expense of others. I know people like that. Offset is the point of bringing higher self into personality, to move towards realizations of unity within diversity and upward movement of spiritual evolution. An enlightened will know that there is no such thing as willpower. The realization of the will is carried out by life force. The impregnation of life force by the will does not take place by the mere decision to achieve the goal. The life force must first be thrown into its receptive state through mediumistic trance. Although we spontaneously and involuntarily enter into this state several times daily, it is imperative to strongly induce it at will in order to ensure the conception of our will. And An unenlightened individual is ignorant of the fact that spontaneously and involuntarily he daily goes through mild trances, which unite all his will to the conceiving part of his spirit. This is like the stream of thoughts that I was talking about, like the random thoughts that you get, and how you're looking for an outward voice for God, and it's actually the inward voice that you're hearing all the time. That, you know, those random ideas that come to you, and you're just like, your heart is just stuck on us. Yes, I agree. When they see us, it's definitely how they think of our boys, not our men. Yeah, our system is definitely not enlightened. They have a lot to do. And the sad part about it is when you look at all of the systems, they all have the African symbols to them. Like the healthcare system has the Kundalini. I forget what the police fraternity has, but they all, you know, have the system. They have the bird, right? They got the
eagle.
The eagle, yeah. So like, and that's supposed to be the symbol of wisdom. So like, you know, they have
wisdom
this
and unity and power.
Facts. They have the symbols, but they're not living the symbols. They're actually unenlightened individuals. You are absolutely correct. I definitely agree with you on that one. Jeb, without the obstructions of demands of earthly existence, the uninvolved man will not awaken. And on one hand, this corresponds to the mundane event that has been successfully brought about by the will that has been enlightened by its adherence to the above 10 principles. On the other hand, it corresponds to the physical resources that the life force needs in order to carry out the undertaking. Example is we are counseled when we receive this Metu to adhere to the laws of earth in order to nourish and maintain the equilibrium of Ra, or as stated more eloquently in the metaphoric system, to protect Ra from worms and noxious serpents dwelling in Jeb. The negative sense corresponds to the failed mundane undertaking resulting in the violating laws of health. Dark and deceased. Skip some. Sheps and enlightened will know that no man is an island. Nekbet and Wachet is an enlightened will know that the life force does not originate in the body of the person, nor can it be contained therein. Like the air, which enters us through breathing and then leaves to be shared with others, the life force circulates through all creatures, thus putting them in touch with each other. The enlightened individual, therefore, will always observe the laws that will keep his life force in perfect equilibrium in order to avoid the subtle negative influences of other creatures in the environment, as well as to secure their assistance towards the realization of this objective. The negative for the dark deceased is an unenlightened individual who perseveres in folly will throw his destiny away. His afterlife existence will be filled with misery and want, even if his life on earth was filled with material goods and comfort. Nekabet and Wachet, I'm going to learn how to pronounce this because I feel like I'm so wrong. An unenlightened individual will be ignorant of the need to maintain psychic equilibrium and the fact that he is spiritually in touch with all things in the world. His psychic disequilibrium will open him to the negative influences from others and the environment. So after going through the positive and negative cards, I'm going to get these cards. It goes on to talk about the tree of life as a guide to planning. Amen is before planning, clear out all notions. Asar, discover a central theme. Tahuti, consult an oracle, sage your theme. Consult an oracle or sage on your theme and details. And then also identify means to carry out the theme and organize them. Rank and polarity. Seker, chant the heka of the deity governing the situation to generate the underlying structure to completion. Mat, seek analogies to your undertaking and its central theme. This is the stage of synthesis. This is when you start to bring your ideas and everything together. Harukuhudi, abstract distinction between the pattern of your undertaking and those that are analogous. Haru, the crossroad, firmly keep in mind your readiness to run the project and not let it run you. That is something that I need to work on. Funny, Trev just said that to me last night, that everything that I do doesn't require all of me. I live with the idea that everything you do should be done with pride. And my definition of pride is 120%. But I'm learning the hard way that not everything deserves 120% of me. it's a lot and it's draining, and just not everything is necessary for that. And in turn of that, I let a lot of stuff run me in a sense that I do get stressed out. Anyway, Haru is the crossroad, and this is firmly keep in mind your readiness to run the project. Oh yeah, I just read that. Het Haru, you are ready to visualize the stages from beginning to end. Sebek, this is what the stage where you start to go outward, and now you're seeking information, your technical details regarding each step, phase, and element. Once you get to all set, you're going through medium mystic trance and meditation on each of the processes. If you guys are familiar with the documentary, it's also a book. It's called The Secret. This emphasizes this part, meditating on each of the processes. You visualize how you're going to go about achieving your goal. Each step of the way, you have to visualize it. You also have to visualize how you will feel, other people that would be affected. Like, you see the entire picture. Jeb is the physical work and the realization of your goal. So that's the tree of life. The next part of this chapter, it goes on to talk about a place and time for all things. And this was so good. This was a really good life guide. I'm not going to read all this out loud because we've been here for like an hour and a half already. But I am currently building my website. And damn, The Secret, respect, bro. It is a European perspective of an African concept. You're definitely correct on that. But at that point of where I was in my life, that movie moved mountains for me. I am in a different place now, but for those who are not in the place that I am now, that is a good way for them to grasp, the initial stage of the concept. We have to be respectful of everybody's journey, and not everybody can learn the same way. Not everybody can dive into this and automatically adopt the concepts of everything being within. Some people still need that external teaching for a little while. I do want to read where we are at on the calendar right now, but I will post the rest of these on my website. A place and time for all things. Right now, what's today's date? It's June 18th. We have the solstice coming up. Woot woot. But the southeast around between 9 a.m. to noon, from May 5th to June 21st, is Haru. And the earth is warming up. Your animal spirit is absorbing the heat and is therefore drying out. Your moderate fire, hot, dry energy is in activity. This is the most auspicious time to carry out such tasks that require the vitality which nourishes the ability to raise truth above our emotional and sensual conditionings. It is the best time to impose your will upon your life force, as the reduction of your moisture has undermined your all-set and het haru faculties. Power breathing, aerobics, remedies for the cardiovascular system, etc. are in harmony with this point in your biorhythm. The bitter flavor will help your fire to rise and maintain itself, and sweets will dissipate your vitality and give power to water, which is emotions. And we are actually entering the water sign of Cancer, and there's so many great things happening in Cancer season. And I have a video about that coming up, and I will correlate this because this is like a nice read. And like I said, I'm in the process of setting up my website now, so I will have all of these because I do want everyone to have this. Like, it's so many good points in this book. I appreciate it. Chapter 19 is titled The Metu, page 266. The underlying principles of spiritual counsel. This chapter goes on and talks about underlying principles, keynote, spiritual counsel, the sphere, planet and day, the color, number, and gems, the time of year, spiritual portfolio, spiritual function, special correlates, and key phrases of each god or card. I believe these are the main 14 cards. These are the 14 cards, I believe. On the tarot card. What is that? The major arcana or the minor? I don't know. Don't quote me on that. But that's what chapter 19 is. It focuses on each topic of the cards.
And the format is basically just like a huge list.
Mm-hmm. I should I'll probably no, this is a lot. Anyway, it also goes in to describe personality portfolios, emotional and mental traits, and social correspondence, as well as career functions, place and events, biological correspondence, physiological pathology and therapy. It also, towards the end of the chapter, talks about the combinations of two cards. If you get two cards at the same time, it talks about how those two go together. This ties in the planets. Like I said, colors, numbers, and gemstones. This is such a good book. I'm going to get these cards and I'm going to get really good at it. And I'm going to follow along with them with you guys because this is cool. So that's the end of what we did. This is our last week of reading Metu Neter. Yes, we are. We are the mythology. Okay, so you're going to be mad at me, but don't be mad at me. So my uncle put me on Neville Goddard. He does YouTube videos, and he said this profound thing to me. When you have to go in the past and change the past in order to change the present. So we are mythology, and we can change the stories, and we can change the narrative. We just have to go inward to do so. But yeah, so this is our last week of reading Metu Neter. This was fun, right? This was our first book reading together on this vlog. This is definitely not the last. If you guys are following me in the last video that we did.
You did say that the next one might be in the melanin book.
No, it will be the melanin book. But yeah, this is definitely not going to be our last. So this week we're going to read chapters 20, which is the meanings of the combined. Oh, no, we're not going to read that because I just went over that with you guys. Those are just like the combines of the cards. Once I get the cards, I'm going to do videos and show you guys how the cards work, and we can get more in depth with the cards and learn the cards together. I think that'll be a cool way to share that journey with you guys.
And then we can use that chapter to help for the example.
Big facts.
So what are the chapters we're going to read for?
Chapter 21, Consulting the Oracle, which is the state of mind and motives for reading, suggested questions, and how to consult. Chapter 22 is Interpreting the Oracle. The suits. Oh, this just goes on to talk about the cards. And chapter 23 is Meditations and Rituals, which is the state of trance and walking trance states and mediumistic trance. And chapter 24, how to meditate and perform a ritual. So we're going to get deeper into the cards. We're going to get deeper into the mediumistic trance and meditation. This is 100 pages. And since we were this is less than 100 pages. This is 40 something pages. And I did really good with the last set of pages. We did like 100. But that's what we're going to do. We're going to get deeper into meditation. We're going to get deeper into the breathing. Like I said, a lot of the stuff that we went over in this book, I'm definitely posting in the blog space on my website. Be on the lookout for that within like the next week or so. I'm trying to take things one step at a time. As I read my horoscope was like, slow down, girl, you're doing too much. And she ain't lying. So yeah, this was a great read. And next week will be our last week going over it. And I know you guys are asking, well, what are we going to do next? Good question. Hold on a second.
Mommy,
Yes.
these bugs are wet and they bite.
Yeah. Hey,
What I do with it?
it's right over there. Look.
A bed bug?
No,
What's bug?
there is no bug. We're talking about a book.
Oh, I thought you were talking about a bug.
Nah.
I know we do have
a bug book in here.
We do have a bug book.
About bug.
A book about bugs. All the bugs in the world.
Sorry, y'all. So this is the science and the myth of melanin. I got this book about 3-4 years ago. It's $15. At least that's what it says on the back. $14.95. This book was written by T. Owens Moore, who is a PhD doctor. I'm gonna read the backs for you guys so you can get a gist of what it is going to be about. Melanin, what is it and what does it do? In this groundbreaking work, perhaps the first full-length scientific analysis of the substance found in practically all living organisms and inanimate objects, T. Owens Moore attempts to dispel the myths, expose the truth, and rectify the common misconceptions associated with melanin. Moore asserts that some writers, lacking a solid scientific foundation, have misled the general public about melanin. In part one, therefore, he focuses on writers of 5 key texts that employ an African-centered perspective. The reoccurring theme espoused by these writers is that melanin alone is the entity that makes Black people psychologically and behaviorally different than non-Black people. Nothing could be further from the truth, argues Moore. In part two, discussing the physiology of melanin, Moore covers the nervous, endocrine, visual, auditory, and vestibular systems, as well as skin structure, vitamin D, and early childhood development. In part three, he explains why he feels that melanin acts as a conduit between the visible or material world and the unseen or spiritual world. For scholars and lay people alike who want the truth about one of the most controversial issues in African American culture, the science and myth of melanin, dispelling the myths, exposing the truth, is indispensable. So we're going to go over this. This will be the next book we read. I believe it'll be like the first week of July. But yeah, we're going to go over like the last 4 chapters of Metu Neter. And then we're going to move into the science and myth of melanin. If I find a free PDF file for that one, I'll let you guys know. For those of you guys who haven't been able to read Metu Neter and you guys are just joining in, I do have a free PDF file link for Metu Neter Volume 1, 2, and 3, I believe. They are on the Less Nobodies page. I will repost that link for you guys so you guys can have a copy of your own online. You guys can also feel free to print it out as you wish as you're reading it, little by little, or, just print out the parts that you like or the ones that you want to keep on you. What else? Got the website. I got my hair skirt video coming up, and that's about it. Thank you for joining me this morning. Sorry that was so long this time. We must give our children the African perspective so they will have a choice to apply to their life. Yes, big facts. And that's what I'm trying to do with my kids. I know that I don't know everything, but I'm not trying. My goal is to keep educating myself. And as I'm educating myself, I want to educate myself and my children because I want them to see me humanized. One of the things that I learned from reading books is that, there's a dehumanization relationship between children and parents. And, children have a hard time seeing like the human in their parents. They see superheroes and perfection and so on and so forth. So when that human part kicks in, it's kind of like a really big, not disappointment, but yeah, kind of like a disappointment. I know I went through that phase of life when, the adults in my life that I was never allowed to sit at the table and eat, the ones that I, made icons in my life, when I came a certain age and the red veil was taken off. It's a different perspective. And so like I try to keep that human perspective with my children at all times. Like see me as I'm growing, as I'm learning, as I'm failing and I'm falling. See how I get up after I fail and fall. See how I educate myself after I realize that I was speaking without knowledge or I was moving without knowledge. This is how you imitate that behavior. So, I'm trying to implement that in my children. I may not always be doing or saying the right things, but, the effort is there. And Black Men of the Nile by Dr. Ben, I'm definitely going to look that up, and I'm definitely going to put that in the queue to read that as a group. I definitely appreciate your input as we did this together. That is so love, and that's it's so inspiring to know that somebody else is going along with us and reading along with us and giving us feedback and stuff like that. I definitely appreciate you guys, and I love you guys. And I hope you guys have a great day. It's still kind of early, so enjoy y'all day. I'm definitely going to take a long nap.
I'm sorry I was interrupted.
But thank you, Timothy Warren, for supporting us in the whole entire video and watching us. We appreciate it.
All right, peace and love, everybody.
Couch, maybe, and throw up.